The knock came just after midnight. Former Marine Sergeant Ethan Walker wasn't expecting visitors. His cabin sat alone deep in the forests of western Montana, miles from the nearest town. Rain hammered the roof while thunder rolled across the mountains. When Ethan opened the door, he found a soaked German shepherd standing on the porch. Beside the dog stood a frightened 12-year-old girl clutching a weathered wooden box against her chest. Before Ethan could ask a single question, the girl looked up at him through tear-filled eyes and spoke 6 words that made his blood run cold. "My dad said to find you." Ethan stared at the box. He recognized it instantly. The last time he saw that box was in Afghanistan 14 years earlier, and the man who owned it had died saving Ethan's life. Rain poured relentlessly from the night sky, turning mountain roads into rivers of mud, while strong winds rattled the windows of Ethan Walker's cabin, hidden deep within the forests of western Montana. Ethan sat alone near the fireplace, reading an old paperback novel and enjoying the rare peace that came with isolation. At 47 years old, he had spent nearly a decade avoiding crowds, avoiding cities, and most importantly, avoiding memories. Before retiring from public life, Ethan served as a Marine sergeant during multiple deployments overseas. Afghanistan changed him forever. Some wounds healed, others simply learned how to hide. Living alone in the mountains helped keep those memories quiet. Most nights passed in complete silence. This one would be different. A sudden knock echoed through the cabin. Ethan glanced toward the door. Nobody visited at this hour. Another knock followed immediately. Then another. Faster this time. Urgent. Ethan stood and moved toward the entrance. Years of military instincts never fully disappeared. He checked the window first. What he saw instantly erased any annoyance he felt. A German shepherd stood on the porch. Beside the dog stood a young girl no older than 12. Both were completely soaked by the storm. Ethan opened the door immediately. "Get inside." The girl hesitated. The dog entered first. Only after the German shepherd crossed the threshold did she follow. Water dripped from her clothes onto the wooden floor. Her face looked pale from cold and exhaustion. Yet, despite everything, she refused to let go of the small wooden box clutched against her chest. Ethan grabbed a blanket and handed it to her. "Sit by the fire." She obeyed silently. The German shepherd remained pressed against her side. The bond between them was obvious. Ethan studied the dog while adding more wood to the fire. Male, approximately 6 years old. Well-trained, alert, protective. Definitely not a stray. Once the girl warmed up slightly, Ethan knelt nearby. "What's your name?" "Emily." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Emily what?" "Dawson." Ethan nodded. "Where are your parents?" Tears immediately filled her eyes. The answer arrived before the words did. "My dad died." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry." Emily looked down at the wooden box. 3 weeks ago. The room grew quiet. The rain continued striking the roof overhead. Ethan carefully chose his next question. "Why are you here?" Emily slowly raised her eyes toward him. "My dad told me to find you if something happened." Ethan frowned. "Find me?" She nodded. Then she pushed the wooden box toward him. The moment Ethan saw it clearly, his entire body froze. The box measured roughly 12 inches long. Dark walnut wood. Brass hinges. One corner chipped. A faded Marine Corps emblem carved into the lid. Ethan recognized every detail. 14 years earlier, he saw that exact box nearly every day. The owner carried it everywhere. Afghanistan, Kandahar, Helmand Province. Forward operating bases scattered across the desert. Ethan reached toward it slowly. His hands trembled. "Where did you get this?" Emily's answer hit like a punch. "It belonged to my dad." Ethan stared at her, then at the German shepherd, then back at the box. There was only one man connected to that box. One man who carried it throughout the war. One man who should not have a 12-year-old daughter standing in Ethan's cabin. "What's your father's name?" Emily swallowed hard. "Staff Sergeant Michael Dawson." Silence consumed the room. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. 14 years earlier, Michael Dawson died during an ambush outside Sangin District. Ethan witnessed it himself. Michael sacrificed his life so the rest of their patrol could escape. The military buried him with full honors. Ethan attended the funeral. He stood beside the grave. He watched the flag being folded. Yet now Michael Dawson apparently had a daughter. And somehow she knew Ethan's name. "That's impossible," Ethan whispered. Emily shook her head. "My dad wasn't in Afghanistan." Ethan stared at her. "What?" She pushed the box closer. "That's why I came." The old wooden box sat between them like a ghost from another lifetime. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Inside, Ethan realized the little girl sitting beside his fire was about to reveal a secret buried for 14 years. A secret connected to a man everyone believed dead. And judging by the fear in her eyes, someone wanted that secret to remain buried forever. The storm continued raging outside Ethan Walker's cabin long after midnight, but neither Ethan nor Emily paid much attention to it anymore. Their entire focus rested on the old wooden box sitting between them. The fire crackled softly in the stone fireplace, while shadows danced across the walls, yet the room felt strangely cold. Ethan could not stop staring at the box. 14 years earlier, he saw Staff Sergeant Michael Dawson carry it through some of the most dangerous places in Afghanistan. Michael never allowed anyone to touch it, never explained what was inside. The box remained one of the few mysteries Ethan never solved. Yet that mystery suddenly seemed far less important than the words Emily had just spoken. "My dad wasn't in Afghanistan." Ethan replayed the sentence in his mind. It contradicted everything he knew, everything he remembered, everything official records claimed happened. "Emily," he said carefully, "I knew Michael Dawson. We served together." The girl looked down at her hands. "I know. Then why would you say he wasn't there?" Emily reached into her jacket pocket and removed a folded photograph protected inside a plastic sleeve. She handed it to him. Ethan examined the image. A younger Michael Dawson smiled beside a woman holding a newborn baby. The photograph appeared roughly 12 years old. That alone made Ethan's pulse quicken. According to military records, Michael died 14 years earlier. The timeline made no sense. "That's me," Emily said quietly, pointing at the infant. Ethan stared at the photograph. "When was this taken?" 12 years ago." Silence filled the room. Ethan felt as though reality had shifted beneath his feet. Either someone had falsified military records on a massive scale, or something far stranger had happened. Emily looked toward the wooden box. "Dad said the answers are inside." Ethan hesitated. Part of him wanted to leave the box closed. Some secrets stayed buried for a reason. Yet another part understood that Michael Dawson had somehow arranged this moment years in advance. Slowly, he lifted the brass latch. The metal clicked softly. Then he opened the lid. Inside rested several items wrapped carefully in cloth. The first was a stack of letters tied together with faded string. Beneath them lay military photographs, identification documents, and an old combat knife Ethan immediately recognized. Then he saw the envelope. Across the front, written in Michael's unmistakable handwriting, were 3 words, "For Ethan Walker." His heart nearly stopped. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The first line made him sit down immediately. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then I am finally gone, and Emily has found you. I know you're confused. You're supposed to be. Because for 14 years, the entire world believed I died in Afghanistan." The letter continued for several pages. By the time Ethan finished reading the first half, he could barely breathe. According to Michael, the man who died during the ambush in Sangin was not him. It was another operative working alongside a classified intelligence unit attached to their deployment. The mission involved infiltrating a dangerous insurgent network operating across multiple provinces. Michael had been recruited shortly before the ambush. Officially, he died that day. Unofficially, his identity disappeared, so he could continue operating under a different name. Ethan stared at the pages in disbelief. "No," Emily watched quietly. "What is it?" Ethan rubbed his face. This can't be real. Yet deep down he already knew it was. Certain details contained inside the letter were known only to Michael. Stories from training, private conversations, memories nobody else could fake. The handwriting matched perfectly. The man who wrote this was Michael Dawson. The letter explained that after completing the operation, Michael could never return to his previous life. Official records permanently listed him as dead. Every connection to his former identity vanished. Several years later, however, he met Emily's mother and built a new life under another name. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then trouble found him again. Ethan reached the final page. Michael's handwriting became noticeably shakier. "If Emily brought you this box, it means they finally found me. I don't know who is responsible yet, but someone has been searching for information connected to that operation for years. People have disappeared, files have vanished, and recently, I learned they know about Emily. Protect her. Don't trust anyone until you know the truth." The room fell silent. Ethan lowered the letter slowly. 1,000 questions raced through his mind. Emily broke the silence first. "What does it say?" Ethan looked at her. For a moment, he saw Michael in her eyes. The same determination, the same quiet strength. "It says your dad trusted me." Tears appeared again. Then he was right. Ethan swallowed hard. "Emily," she interrupted him. "Someone broke into our house 3 days after he died." Ethan's attention sharpened instantly. "What?" "They were looking for the box." The German Shepherd suddenly lifted his head. The dog had remained unusually calm throughout the conversation. Now every muscle in his body tightened. His ears stood upright. He stared toward the front window. Ethan immediately noticed the change. Years of military experience told him exactly what it meant. The dog sensed something. Or someone. Slowly, Ethan stood and moved toward the darkness outside. Rain still fell heavily. At first he saw nothing. Then a pair of headlights appeared through the trees, nearly 200 yards from the cabin. They disappeared almost immediately. Yet the brief glimpse was enough. A vehicle, watching, waiting. Ethan felt every instinct from his Marine days come roaring back to life. He turned toward Emily. "Has anyone followed you here?" The girl looked frightened. "I don't know." The German Shepherd released a low growl. Ethan's eyes returned to the letter lying open on the table. Michael's final warning suddenly felt far more urgent than before. Protect her. Don't trust anyone until you know the truth. Somewhere beyond the rain and darkness, someone was searching for the box. And now they knew exactly where it was. Ethan Walker barely slept that night. After spotting the headlights in the trees, he extinguished every unnecessary light inside the cabin and spent hours watching the forest through different windows while the storm continued sweeping across the Montana mountains. Emily eventually fell asleep beneath a blanket near the fireplace, with the German Shepherd curled protectively beside her. Even while resting, the dog remained alert. Every unusual sound caused one ear to twitch. Every creak from outside drew his attention. Ethan trusted that instinct. Military dogs and working dogs rarely reacted without reason. If the German Shepherd believed danger was nearby, Ethan was inclined to agree. Just before sunrise, the rain finally stopped. Gray clouds drifted across the mountains while fog settled between the trees. Ethan stepped outside carrying binoculars and carefully examined the area surrounding the cabin. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Then he found the tire tracks. Fresh, deep. A vehicle had definitely stopped along the old logging road during the night. More troubling, a second set of tracks led away from the road and toward the cabin before turning back. Someone had approached on foot. Someone had been close enough to observe the house. Ethan followed the prints for several yards before stopping. The person had moved carefully, deliberately, not the behavior of a lost traveler or curious hunter. Whoever visited the cabin knew exactly what they were doing. When Ethan returned inside, Emily was already awake. The German Shepherd sat beside her, watching the door. "You found something," she said. Ethan nodded. Someone was here. The girl's face immediately paled. The same people? Maybe. Ethan hated uncertainty, but honesty mattered. "We don't know yet." Emily looked down at the wooden box resting on the table. Dad said they wouldn't stop. Ethan remembered the final lines of Michael's letter. "They finally found me." The statement bothered him more with every passing hour. It suggested Michael had spent years avoiding someone. Not a single person. An organization. A group. People with resources and patience. The question was why. Ethan reopened the box and began examining the remaining contents more carefully. The photographs revealed little at first. Most showed military personnel, vehicles, or remote locations in Afghanistan. Then one image caught his attention. Several soldiers stood beside a transport truck in a desert compound. Michael appeared among them. So did Ethan. But there was another man in the background, a civilian wearing sunglasses. Ethan immediately recognized him. "No way." Emily looked up. "What?" Ethan stared at the photograph. The civilian's name was Richard Kane. 14 years earlier, Kane worked as a government contractor attached to intelligence operations in Afghanistan. Ethan remembered him because nobody trusted him. Kane rarely spoke, rarely smiled. Yet somehow he always appeared wherever classified missions occurred. "You know him?" Emily asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "I wish I didn't." Before he could explain further, the German Shepherd suddenly jumped to his feet. The dog's reaction was immediate and intense. A low growl filled the room. Every hair along his back stood upright. Ethan moved toward the window. A black SUV was approaching the cabin. "Stay here," he said. Emily's eyes widened. "Who is it?" "I don't know." But he had a feeling. The vehicle stopped roughly 50 yards from the porch. Two men stepped out. Neither looked local. Both wore expensive outdoor clothing that seemed strangely out of place in the mountains. Ethan watched carefully as they approached. The German Shepherd moved directly in front of Emily. Protective. Ready. One of the men knocked on the door. Ethan opened it only a few inches. "Can I help you?" The taller man smiled politely. "Mr. Walker?" Ethan didn't answer. The man's smile remained unchanged. "We're looking for a young girl named Emily Dawson." Ethan's expression hardened immediately. "Why?" "We're friends of her father's." The lie arrived too quickly, too smoothly. Ethan knew it the moment he heard it. "Funny," he said. "Because her father never mentioned you." The second man's smile disappeared. "Perhaps we should speak inside." "No." Silence followed. The atmosphere changed instantly. The friendly masks vanished. Not completely. Just enough. The taller man sighed. "Mr. Walker, this doesn't need to be difficult." Ethan stepped slightly forward. "Then leave." Neither man moved. Finally, the taller one reached into his jacket and removed a business card. "If you change your mind, call us." Ethan accepted the card. The men returned to their SUV and drove away. Only after the vehicle disappeared down the mountain road did he look at the card. The name printed across the front meant nothing. The company didn't exist. He knew because he had seen similar cover identities before. The visit wasn't about finding Emily. It was about confirming she was here, and now they had their answer. Emily approached cautiously. "Who were they?" Ethan looked toward the road. "People who want something from your father's box." The girl wrapped her arms around herself. "What do we do now?" Ethan glanced at the photographs spread across the table, then at Michael's letter, then at the German Shepherd, who still hadn't fully relaxed. Somewhere inside the contents of that box was the reason Michael spent 14 years hiding. Somewhere inside was the reason strangers were now showing up in remote mountain cabins. And if Ethan wanted to keep Emily safe, he needed answers fast. Late that afternoon, he finally found the next clue. Hidden beneath a false wooden panel inside the bottom of the box was a small flash drive. No label, no markings. Just a simple black device carefully concealed where nobody would think to look. Ethan stared at it for several seconds. Michael had hidden it for a reason. Whatever information it contained was likely the real secret. The secret people were willing to kill for. As darkness settled over the mountains once again, Ethan plugged the flash drive into his laptop. A single encrypted file appeared on the screen. Then another, and another. Hundreds of documents, names, financial records, mission reports, photographs. The deeper Ethan looked, the colder he became. This was not merely evidence of corruption. It was evidence of betrayal. Betrayal involving people who should have been protecting American soldiers. Betrayal reaching far beyond Afghanistan. Betrayal that explained why Michael Dawson was forced to disappear. Suddenly, the knocking on the door earlier that day made perfect sense. The men searching for Emily weren't trying to recover old memories. They were trying to erase the truth. And now Ethan possessed the one thing they feared most. Proof. Ethan Walker spent most of the night staring at the files stored on the flash drive, while Emily slept beside the fireplace and the German Shepherd remained stationed near the front door like a silent guardian. Outside, the mountains were dark and still. But inside the cabin, Ethan felt as though a war had suddenly returned to his life. The documents on the screen painted a picture far worse than anything he expected. At first glance, the files appeared to be ordinary military reports from Afghanistan. But the deeper he looked, the more disturbing the truth became. Financial transactions connected to government contracts, intelligence summaries that had been altered before reaching military commanders. Lists of local informants whose identities had somehow been leaked to insurgent groups, mission records that did not match official reports. And woven through all of it was the same name, Richard Kane. Ethan felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. 14 years earlier, Kane had been a contractor attached to several intelligence operations in Afghanistan. Officially, he worked as a logistics advisor. Unofficially, nobody seemed entirely sure what he actually did. Soldiers learned quickly not to ask questions. Now the files revealed the truth. Kane had been part of a network that profited from the war itself. Information was being sold. Operations were being manipulated. Certain attacks that were blamed on bad intelligence were not accidents at all. Men and women died because someone made money when missions failed. Ethan sat back in stunned silence. He personally knew some of the names appearing in those reports. Marines, soldiers, interpreters, good people who never made it home. For years, their families believed they died in the chaos of war. Now Ethan realized some of those deaths were connected to deliberate betrayal. Then he found Michael Dawson's final report. Unlike the other documents, this one contained a personal recording. Ethan clicked the file. Michael appeared on the screen, older than Ethan remembered, tired. His hair showed traces of gray, yet his eyes remained sharp. For several seconds, Michael simply stared into the camera. Then he began speaking. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and the truth is finally out." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Even after all these years, hearing his friend's voice again felt unreal. Michael explained that shortly before the ambush that officially marked his death, he accidentally discovered evidence linking Kane and several others to a corruption network operating inside military contracting systems. Before he could report what he found, intelligence officials approached him with another option. Instead of dying publicly, Michael would disappear. Official records would list him as killed in action. Under a new identity, he would spend years helping gather evidence against the people involved. "I thought it would take a few months," Michael said on the screen. It turned into 14 years. The operation expanded far beyond Afghanistan. Money moved through shell companies. Witnesses vanished. Evidence disappeared. Each time investigators got close, someone leaked information. Michael eventually realized the network reached into places nobody expected. That was why he remained hidden. Not for himself, for anyone connected to the case, including his future family. Then Michael's expression changed. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. "If Emily brought you the box, then they found me before I could finish this myself." Ethan swallowed hard. Michael continued, "The files are enough to expose everyone. But they'll come after her. Protect my daughter. Whatever happens, don't let them bury the truth again." The recording ended. Silence filled the cabin. Ethan sat motionless for several moments. The German Shepherd slowly approached and rested his head against Ethan's leg, almost as though he understood. Ethan scratched behind the dog's ears while staring at the dark laptop screen. Michael had sacrificed 14 years of his life protecting evidence that could expose powerful people. And in the end, he died before seeing justice completed. The responsibility now belonged to Ethan. Morning arrived with another unwelcome surprise. A pickup truck belonging to the local sheriff pulled into the driveway. Ethan immediately became cautious. Michael's files made one thing painfully clear. Trust had become dangerous. Sheriff Daniel Brooks stepped out alone. Ethan knew him casually. A decent man from everything he'd seen. Still, caution came first. The sheriff approached slowly. "Mind if we talk?" Ethan nodded but remained on the porch. Brooks studied him for a moment. "Two men filed a report this morning." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Really? They claimed a missing child may be staying here." Emily appeared behind the window inside the cabin. Brooks noticed her immediately. "She's Emily Dawson?" Ethan nodded. The sheriff sighed. "Then you're in trouble." Ethan felt tension building. "Why?" Brooks looked around before lowering his voice. "Because those two men aren't who they claim to be." Ethan remained silent. "I checked." Brooks continued. "Their company doesn't exist. Their identification is fake." Relief mixed with concern. At least the sheriff wasn't working with them. "They're searching for something," Brooks said. Ethan glanced toward the cabin. "I know." The sheriff studied him carefully. "How serious is this?" Ethan considered the question. Then he looked directly at Brooks. "Big enough that people have already died." The sheriff's face hardened. "What do you need?" Ethan hesitated. 14 years earlier, he trusted Michael with his life. Now Michael was asking him to trust someone else. Finally, he made his decision. "I need a secure way to get information to federal investigators." Brooks nodded slowly. Then we'd better move fast. The plan was simple. Too simple. Sheriff Brooks would arrange contact with a trusted federal task force operating out of Denver. Ethan would deliver copies of Michael's files. Once the evidence reached the right people, the network protecting Kane would begin collapsing. Unfortunately, plans rarely survive reality. Less than an hour later, the German Shepherd exploded into barking. Ethan rushed to the window. 3 black SUVs were climbing the mountain road toward the cabin. Fast. Very fast. Sheriff Brooks saw them too. "How many people know she's here?" Ethan asked. "Nobody." The sheriff's expression darkened. "Which means someone listened to our conversation." The vehicles continued approaching. Emily stepped into the room holding the wooden box. Fear filled her face. "They're back." Ethan looked toward the mountains behind the cabin, then toward the approaching SUVs, then toward Michael's daughter. The fight for the truth had finally reached his doorstep, and this time, there would be no more running. The 3 black SUVs continued climbing the narrow mountain road toward Ethan Walker's cabin while tension filled every corner of the small wooden home. Sheriff Daniel Brooks stood near the front window with his hand resting on his sidearm. Emily clutched the old wooden box against her chest. The German Shepherd stood between her and the door, his ears upright and his eyes locked on the approaching vehicles. Ethan remained surprisingly calm. Years earlier, situations like this were part of his daily life. The difference now was that he was no longer protecting fellow Marines. He was protecting a little girl and the final truth left behind by a man he thought had died 14 years ago. The first SUV stopped roughly 50 yards from the cabin. The others positioned themselves behind it. Several men stepped out. Ethan immediately recognized one of them, Richard Kane, older now. Gray hair touched his temples, but the cold expression remained unchanged. 14 years had altered his appearance, not his character. Kane looked toward the cabin and smiled faintly. Ethan hated that smile. "Stay inside," he told Emily, "no matter what happens." The girl nodded. The German Shepherd remained beside her. Sheriff Brooks glanced at Ethan. "You know him?" Ethan's jaw tightened. Unfortunately, Kane approached the porch alone while the others remained near the vehicles. He stopped several feet from the cabin and raised both hands. "Ethan." The familiarity in his voice made Ethan angry. "Richard." Kane sighed dramatically. "I was hoping we'd never meet again." "Funny," Ethan replied. "I was hoping the same thing." For several seconds, neither man spoke. The mountains around them remained silent. Finally, Kane looked toward the cabin window. "The girl has something that belongs to me." Ethan laughed. "You mean evidence?" Kane's smile disappeared. "You don't understand what you're involved in." "Actually, I do." Ethan stepped forward. Michael understood too. The mention of Michael Dawson's name caused a brief flash of irritation across Kane's face. It lasted less than a second, but Ethan noticed. "Michael should have left it alone," Kane said quietly. "A lot of people would have lived longer." The statement confirmed everything. Michael was never paranoid. He was never imagining threats. They really had hunted him. For 14 years, Ethan felt a surge of anger unlike anything he had experienced in years. He spent 14 years protecting the truth. Kane shrugged. And now he's dead. The cruelty of the response removed any remaining doubt. Kane wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to recover the evidence. "It's over," Ethan said. "The files are already copied." For the first time, uncertainty appeared in Kane's eyes. Ethan wasn't bluffing. While the SUVs traveled toward the cabin, Sheriff Brooks had quietly transmitted copies of the files through a secure federal channel. Multiple agencies now possessed Michael's evidence. Kane sensed it immediately. "What did you do?" Ethan smiled. "What Michael should have been allowed to do 14 years ago." Silence followed. Then Kane looked toward the mountains and laughed softly. Not because he found anything funny, because he realized he had lost. Minutes later, the sound of helicopters echoed across the valley. Then came additional vehicles, federal agents, state investigators, law enforcement units from multiple jurisdictions. Kane turned slowly. His expression hardened. The operation he spent years protecting was collapsing in real time. One by one, the men near the SUVs lowered their weapons. Several attempted to flee. None succeeded. Within an hour, Richard Kane sat in handcuffs while agents secured evidence and conducted interviews. The network Michael Dawson spent 14 years exposing was finally finished. As law enforcement activity unfolded around the property, Ethan remained on the cabin porch. For the first time since Emily arrived, he felt the weight lifting from his shoulders. Michael's mission was complete. The truth survived. And most importantly, Emily was safe. Later that evening, after investigators departed, a federal agent handed Ethan a sealed envelope recovered from one of Michael's hidden files. This was marked for Emily. Ethan carried it inside. Emily sat beside the fireplace with the German Shepherd lying at her feet. Together, they opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, Michael's final letter to his daughter. Emily cried quietly while reading it. Michael told her how proud he was. He apologized for the secrets he had been forced to keep. He explained that everything he did was meant to protect her future. Most importantly, he told her never to let fear define her life. Ethan looked away to give her privacy. Some moments belong only to family. Several weeks passed. The investigation dominated national headlines. Arrests spread across multiple states. Financial records exposed years of corruption. Families finally received answers regarding operations and losses that never made sense. Through it all, Michael Dawson's name slowly transformed from a forgotten casualty into a man who sacrificed nearly half his life to expose the truth. One spring afternoon, Ethan drove Emily to a small cemetery overlooking a valley filled with wildflowers. A simple headstone stood beneath a pine tree. Michael Dawson. For years, the grave existed under another name. Now it finally reflected the truth. Emily placed flowers beside the stone. The German Shepherd sat quietly next to her. "He would have liked you," Ethan said. Emily smiled through tears. "I think he already did." The dog rested his head against her shoulder. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The wind moved gently through the trees above them. Peaceful, quiet, earned. Before leaving, Ethan noticed something attached to the back of the headstone. A small metal plaque investigators had recently installed. It contained only a single sentence. "He died twice so the truth could live." Ethan stared at the words. They perfectly captured Michael's story. Officially, he died in Afghanistan 14 years earlier. In reality, he spent the rest of his life fighting a different war. A quieter war. A lonelier war. One that very few people would ever fully understand. Yet in the end, he won. As the sun began setting across the Montana mountains, Ethan, Emily, and the German Shepherd started walking back toward the truck. For the first time since arriving at the cabin during that terrible storm, Emily looked hopeful. Not because her grief was gone, it wasn't, but because she finally knew the truth about her father, and because the people he trusted had kept their promise. Michael Dawson's secret was no longer hidden inside an old wooden box. It now lived in the open, where nobody could bury it again. And thanks to one loyal German Shepherd who carried that box through a storm, a father's final mission would never be forgotten. Sometimes the greatest heroes are not the ones whose names appear in history books. Sometimes they are the people who quietly carry a burden for years, asking for no recognition and expecting no reward. Michael Dawson was one of those people. To the world, he died in Afghanistan 14 years ago. His name became another entry in a long list of sacrifices made during war. But the truth was far more complicated. For 14 years, Michael lived in the shadows, giving up his identity, his past, and the chance to live openly so that one day the truth could be exposed. He paid a price few people could imagine. Yet he never stopped moving forward because he believed some things were worth sacrificing for. He believed the truth mattered. He believed innocent people deserved justice. And above all, he believed his daughter deserved a future free from the dangers he spent years fighting. Ethan Walker thought his days of serving others ended when he left the Marines. Like many veterans, he carried memories he preferred not to revisit and wounds that never fully healed. Yet one stormy night, a knock on the door reminded him that purpose has a way of finding us when we least expect it. Through a frightened little girl and a loyal German Shepherd, Ethan was given one final mission. Not a mission of war, but a mission of loyalty, friendship, and honor. Emily Dawson's journey reminds us that courage does not depend on age. She lost her father, found herself pursued by dangerous people, and carried a burden that would have overwhelmed many adults. Yet she kept moving forward because she trusted the promise her father left behind. She chose faith over fear, and because of that choice, the truth survived. Then there is the German Shepherd. He never spoke a word. He never understood classified files or government corruption. Yet he understood loyalty. He understood protection. He understood that a little girl needed help, and that somewhere in the mountains lived a man her father trusted. Sometimes animals remind us of virtues that humans too easily forget: faithfulness, devotion, love without conditions. If the dog had not guided Emily through that storm, none of this would have happened. The evidence would have remained hidden. The truth might have died forever. And a father's final sacrifice could have been forgotten. Perhaps that is why stories like this stay with us long after they end, because they remind us that one person can make a difference. One promise can survive decades. One act of loyalty can change multiple lives. And one decision to do what is right can echo far beyond our own lifetime. Michael Dawson never lived to see justice completed. Yet because he refused to surrender, because Ethan honored his trust, because Emily found the courage to keep going, and because a loyal German shepherd never gave up, the mission was finally finished. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's sacrifice changed your life? Or have you ever known a dog whose loyalty felt almost beyond explanation? We'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories about veterans, loyal dogs, faith, sacrifice, family, and second chances. May God bless you and your loved ones, protect those who carry unseen burdens, comfort those who mourn, and remind all of us that truth, loyalty, and love are worth defending no matter the cost. And may you never forget that sometimes the most important missions are not the ones fought on battlefields, but the ones fought quietly in order to protect the people we love.